So I think, as you said, that any new relationship revolves around the typical planning dates and meeting to know each other more, which is not going to happen for some time now. And even if it is going to happen, there are going to be so many social distancing norms that we will be preoccupied with, like wearing a mask or wearing gloves. That the essence of meeting somebody or the purity of it is going to get kind of lost. So with all that background noise in the mind, with in terms of the fear, I think it's going to be a new experience for everybody. Just recently, one of my clients was sharing with me that she just said that I'm experiencing a spark with somebody, and I don't know whether I should go ahead with a relationship or not, because I don't know what all difficulties we'll be facing, because we can't get out of the house and we can't meet. So I'm hearing people are trying to avoid the spark. They're not going ahead with that spark, even if they are feeling that connect with people. So there's a general sense of fear. And I think with any relationship comes a set of expectations, and we have that in our minds. But right now, we need to change that set of expectations or conventions, as we call, the rules of dating or a relationship, to be able to adapt to this new change. And I think that is when the fear will go away. So, not seeing relationships through the lens that we have been seeing, but kind of redefining or changing how we see relationships is going to make it a lot more easier.
Okay, so my take on it is purely medical, and whatever I've been reading has been around, okay, what is acceptable if you're dating or you're starting off in a new relationship and what isn't. So I'll talk a little bit about that. So whatever we know of COVID, and since it's impacted relationships, it's two kinds of relationships that we're looking at. One is people that are already in a relationship and not living in with their partners, and the other is people who are going to be stepping into new ones. So when we talk about the first group, if you have been in a relationship, I think the most important thing that you need to remember is you can meet and you can do everything just the same way, as long as you have been socially isolating apart from that. So meet up with your partner as long as you're not hanging out in parties or in large groups. And as far as relationships starting afresh goes, like Saloni said, you need to redefine, you need to look at them in a different way and set a new normal. Because unfortunately, there is no set guideline on starting intimate physical contact with a new person in the times of COVID. You could explore other options, you could explore video calls, things that all of us are doing, but no set guidelines on what you could do when you meet a new person. You could possibly get close to them physically after having seen no symptoms for 14 days, or after, if they've been sick before and you know that they've been sick, then after they have recovered from the illness around 7 to 10 days after is when you could probably hug it out or kiss them, because these are intimate acts and 100% they are going to transmit an infection if they have one. So that's my 2 cents on it.
So that sounds kind of scary. I mean, it's like a travel ban. Like, okay, if you want to meet your date, then you have to check for 14 days of like quarantine.
Yeah, what helps is if you're going to just talk and connect, there's no harm really. So when we look back at take a step back and see how COVID is transmitted, it's through respiratory droplets, it's through aerosol. So if you are in a closed, confined space within less than 6 feet of each other, your risk of transmission is going to be really high. And when we are trying to adapt to a way of life with COVID, we have to look at the risk in each individual situation. So if you're meeting in an open place, sitting 6 feet apart, there's no reason why you shouldn't spend 3 hours out in the sun and talk to one another. Like, pick an open place. Unfortunately, that is a little hard in India with other people being around you. But best case scenario, sit on your balcony 6 feet apart and talk to one another.
Seems like the olden times are back, where maybe, yeah. So I think you brought up a really interesting point, with the 6 feet apart distance requirement, which is the aspect of touch. I mean, obviously in relationships, touch is a indispensable aspect. And of course, keeping general long distance relationships apart. And I'd love to know Saloni's inputs on this about the importance of touch for comfort, and how do you even deal with the absence of it for sustained periods of time? Because relationship or not, just generally being isolated in your own apartment and not being able to touch someone or hug someone is obviously a very
Yeah.
difficult and traumatic process. So I'd love to know what your thoughts are on that.
Right. So I think, as we all know, that physical touch releases this hormone called oxytocin, right? And that kind of that which is called the love hormone also, and it gives us a sense of comfort, a sense of attachment with a person. And it's not just romantic relationships; it could be with our parents or siblings also. It's just to do with a touch of somebody who we really love. And since it's such an important component, of how we also deal with stress in our everyday life, oxytocin also helps us fight stress. It helps us calm down. It also helps us, equips us with dealing stress in our everyday life. And since this physical touch is going to be missing for some time, we will be finding it a little difficult to, adapt to the new ways of communicating where we have to avoid touching each other a lot. I was talking to a client the other day who lives in Canada, and he lives alone, and he's physically isolating, and he said that I'm feeling lonely now because I know I will not be able to go out and meet and experience that physical touch for a very long time. And he said, I'm contemplating getting a pet soon because, the immediate loneliness and the immediate loss of touch can be compensated even with a pet, right? You feel the same affection and you feel when you play with a pet. So a lot of people are doing that, and that can be one way of kind of compensating that. Another way is, self-soothing. I know it's something that's kind of unheard of, but when we are missing physical touch, sometimes I've heard my clients say that we put ourselves to sleep, right? We kind of hug ourselves, or we hug a pillow to kind of compensate for a partner, and that can also trigger the same response as if we are actually hugging somebody. So a lot of people are doing that. But I think if we establish deep, meaningful conversations with our partners, or anybody for that matter, the sometimes we feel so touched, metaphorically, in a conversation or in an emotional exchange, that sometimes the need for physical touch also goes away temporarily. So I think engaging in more meaningful conversations is also a very good idea, because since the entire communication has moved online, it's become virtual, and we're not very used to having deep conversations online, right? We are used to like the texts and emojis more. But investing in preferring phone calls or video calls where we can actually have an emotional exchange, where we can also see the non-verbal cues and expressions of each other, can help, somewhere compensate for the lack of physical touch.
Renuka, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, so this is a very funny opinion here. So the moment lockdown was announced here, I'm based in the US for people that don't know. One of the dog shelters here completely ran out of dogs to adopt.
Yeah.
And that was so amazing. It is like, yeah, people are realizing how
Yeah.
positive an effect animals can have on your life. So that was really nice. Like a Chicago shelter, I think, just put up a notice saying, we love this, but like we are out of dogs. And they are not returned. The fear is that people may go back to returning these dogs to the shelter once the lockdown lifts. But so
Yeah.
far, there's been no news around it. And something that people do engage here for touch and saying how important it is just taking an informed decision and sort of accepting your risks. Normally, people are communicating with elbow touch instead of hand touch because there's less of a direct risk for you to touch your face with your elbow. So
Yeah.
you just open the elevator with an elbow, shake, like instead of shake hands, bump elbows. And then the other thing is people directly ask saying, are you hugging? Because if you are, if since I'm okay with my risk of being infected, if I think I'm, fine with it, ultimately it's your decision. So if you're fine, people explicitly ask, are you hugging, and go ahead and do that. So there are people that still do engage in hugging because they really, really think that need triumphs the risk of being infected.
Just to add to Saloni's point, when you said, having a meaningful conversation and using this time to, really dig deep into your relationship, there's this link online which says 36 questions that you can sort of share with your partner or a loved one.
Yeah.
And I found it really interesting, especially in this time where we can share the link on the chat as well, where basically people, it starts with like slightly mm, like their personal questions that you ask each other, and then you slowly learn so much about the person that it really helps you explore a lot about that person's life and feelings and things like that. It's a really
Yeah.
great way because sometimes it's hard to just kind of have a meaningful conversation if you like set an agenda and set,
Yeah.
send them a Zoom link. It's not possible all the time. So
True.
just to
True.
and when Renuka talked about 6 feet apart meeting, going to the beach or to parks is probably something, if in your area, if that's a possibility. It's possible to just play like a game of football or something. It's a game that allows you to move around, be physically active. You're not using your hands, and you are still being able to engage. And physical activity is actually a great way to like bond with a partner. So
Yeah.
yeah.